Well, welcome everybody. We're here with Lynn Cohick to interview her regarding this big book that she has there. She's one of the editors.
Big book, it is.
Yes. Actually, this cover is different from the cover that I have, but I think this should be the maybe the English edition, and there's the American edition, IBP, and they usually do different things. So I just like to know a little bit about your background, Lynn. If you tell us.
Sure. I'm my title is the Distinguished Professor of New Testament. I know, distinguished of New Testament at Houston Christian University. So I've been teaching the New Testament at different colleges and seminaries for maybe 30 or more years. I hate to count too high.
Yes.
Makes me too old.
Yes.
And I also taught for 3 years in the late 1990s in Nairobi at the Nairobi Evangelical Graduate School of Theology. It is now part of the Africa International University, AIU, still there in Nairobi. So I've had a chance to teach in different places, and I love teaching here where we're talking, which is Ridley College.
Yes. And what brought you to Ridley College this time around? Is this your first time, or you've been here before?
No, I have actually been here I think the first time I came was over a decade ago.
Okay.
Yes, so I think in 2015, and I did some recording, of some classes in the Pauline letters. And at least some of them are still being used.
Okay.
So every once in a while, someone will say, "Oh, I had you as my teacher." And I thought, wait, how did you have me?
Yes.
And it's because they saw the online class.
And I seen you online as well from this website where they show a lot of people who teach, I think, online seminary or something like that.
Seminary Now.
Seminary Now, yeah.
Yes.
So that's the first time I saw you. I saw your name some other places, but then I finally saw the face.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
Well, today I just like to pose some questions. There are two sets. One is from me, and one is from my associate Veronica from Argentina, that she's also following your work. So I would like to be on time. I'd like to just ask you the first question about the dictionary. What problem is a dictionary like Dictionary Paul in his letters trying to solve for students, pastors, and serious lay readers? And what kinds of questions it is not designed to answer?
Right. So the dictionary is trying to inform the reader about the latest ideas on whatever particular topic. So it's not trying to teach a particular position, such as if you were a Methodist teaching from a Methodist perspective, or a Reform teaching from a Reform perspective. Rather, it's trying to take a broader view than that. Also, depending on the topic, it might give 3 or 4 different options for understanding a topic. So, or it might try to tell you, let's say the topic is angels. When Paul mentions angels, and how does that topic fit with his overall argument on the gospel? So there's a wide range of what the purpose of the dictionary is, but primarily, just like if you look up a word in a dictionary, it's because you really don't know what it is, and you just want to find out kind of basic but trustworthy information.
Yes. Coming from a Latin American perspective, there's been lately a push, and I know this in English as well, about confessionalism, that some people say, well, if you're Methodist, actually, or Baptist in my case, they dismiss you because you have a particular point of view. But some scholars have, like this dictionary tries to avoid that, I guess.
That's right. So it is, we expected, myself and Scott McKnight and Nijay Gupta, we chose people who, in making their entries and writing their entries, would imagine any confessing Christian, right? Or even a student who is simply learning about Christianity. So it was targeted to a very large or wide audience, but it also was written from an evangelical perspective. That is, someone who believes the Bible is the Word of God and is important for salvation. So all of the contributors had that confession, but then they came from very different scholarly backgrounds and different confessing churches. So there's a mixture from that standpoint.
So you are getting the best that evangelical Christianity can give.
That's right, exactly.
Oh, that's good to hear. Well, my second question is the first edition of this dictionary appeared in the early 90s, and I still have it. I haven't thrown it away.
Yeah.
Still have it there. But what changed in Pauline studies that made a new edition necessary, and how did those changes shape what topics you included or reframed?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so we have just, I think, 141 scholars who contributed to this volume, and only 15 of those had participated in the first volume. I mean, many of them who participated in the first volume are now with the Lord. But even those 15 who contributed to both, their second contribution was definitely updated. So this is a very new volume in that sense. And I think over the last 15 or 20 years, the scholarship on the Apostle Paul has grown enough that there are particular topics that people want to focus on. So, for example, ecology, creation care, the study of our responsibility in the environment. And Paul has things to say about how we interact with our natural surroundings.
Yes.
So that was a new article. Or the institution of patronage, benefaction. That has become a really important topic in the study of Paul, and that's a rather new topic from a scholarly perspective.
Barclay has introduced, I forgot his name, because I talked to him before too. I interviewed him once for his book, The Gift.
Yes. And that is revolutionizing, I think, the study of Paul in the New Testament. Yes, Barclay's work on gift and gift giving and benefaction. Absolutely. And then you also have an interest in people's perspectives. So we have a chapter on the African American views on Paul, on the Asian and Asian American views on Paul. And of course, we have chapters on Luther and Augustine and Calvin. So we try to help people not just topics that Paul talked about, but how do others talk about Paul? Those important historical figures and how they interact with Paul.
We had in the previous one, I remember, at least the one that I remember, is David Williams. He wrote a previous, also an entry on Paul in his letters in the first edition. Not in the second edition. He's with the Lord as well. When I was studying here. And I like how you say that there are new challenges for the church and for Christians, like you said, patronage, and as well also the environment, how Paul deals with it. Because some Christians, as you know, they think, why should we care? The Lord is going to destroy everything. Wow, Romans 8 is very important.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, the creation itself is groaning for the children of God to be revealed. Absolutely. And I think also there's been changes in scholarship that include scholars from around the world and more women, more global voices are speaking into the study of Paul, and we wanted to make sure those were heard.
Because even in the 90s when I was doing my undergraduate, it was mainly Northern Hemisphere, European, United States, and some Western countries, Australia, New Zealand. But it wasn't much. We didn't hear much voices from Africa, Asia, or Latin America. And now it's we've been included.
Yes.
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 Thank you very
As
much.
you should. Well, as you should.
And also women. That's one of the things
Yes.
you're going to talk about it later. Also, women have been have a place in the table now.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So that's going to be reflected in this new volume. Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Well, the last question on this part is, if someone buys this and feels overwhelmed because it's quite
I know.
thick.
Look at how thick this is.
Yes, this is quite thick, 1,200 pages plus.
Oh, yes.
So I didn't bring mine because I said I'm going to use
It's
that
too
one
heavy,
library. Yes,
even
too heavy. Yes, too heavy. Too heavy. So what's your recommended on-ramp? I mean, how should a reader move from an entry to further study? And I know as a teacher, you know, we always get told, you want to write an essay on certain things. I mean, I'll let you do it for the audience. But especially when entries disagree or present multiple viewpoints, like you have mentioned, when they disagree with what the reader is saying, or they disagree with the confessional, like I said, Baptist or Anglican thing. How do you recommend a student or a pastor to deal with that?
Sure. Well, I think so it can feel overwhelming, but you don't have to read from the beginning to the end. Like with any dictionary, you pick your topic. So right now, I'm looking at a discussion on the first letter to the Corinthians, 1 Corinthians. And so if I am doing a Bible study, or I'm going to be giving a message, or I'm going to be giving a sermon, wouldn't it be good to just get an overview of the letter? So that's one way that I could see using this. Or if you are doing a Bible study and someone says, well, I don't understand the idea of justification. Oh, okay, that is a very difficult concept for sure. So how about if I look up the topic of justification and I see, this is what these are the ideas. So in some ways it can help you when you begin a study. In other ways, this dictionary can help you if someone asks a question or you need to go deeper into a theological idea. So those would be some of the ways and that you can use this. And I would also say, I'm looking at the entry knowledge and mind, which Paul talks a lot about. He uses those words quite a bit in his arguments. And I'm looking at almost a page and a half of bibliography.
Yes.
So, then you can say, I'm interested in this aspect or a further exploration of this. And then here I have many people that I can look at. So it can help you do even deeper research. It can be all that you need, or it can help you do deeper.
It also helps students.
Yes. Oh, of course, because you turn to one of these names and they have a bibliography. And so you can get even more.
Yes. Yeah. So that's a trick. That's a tip for everybody who's looking how to do essays.
Yes, that's right.
How not to be looking all the time at the library and said, okay, I have this list of books, I can go and research them.
That's right. And if you're reading along and you think, I just disagree with the author's conclusion, I think scholarship is built on disagreeing, because as we disagree and we form our argument, we sharpen our own ideas, and maybe we persuade someone else who then says, I'll take your idea and I'll develop my idea over here. So in and of itself, disagreeing with someone can actually be really fruitful. But you have to do it in the proper way, which is, first of all, to be very clear about what the author that you're looking at, what they are saying. So you have to be fair to their argument. We have what's called creating a straw man argument, where you're not really giving the full robust argument. You're giving only part of it so that you can knock it down.
Yes.
So instead, you want to what's called steel man, right? Like make their case be very fair, and then say, here's where their weaknesses are. Here's what they haven't dealt with. So then that sharpens your argument.
Yes.
So yeah, disagree all you want with, just be fair to their argument and be clear in your response.
Yeah, one of the things is the doctrine of justification, let's say. Some people have been told that it means only this and not anything else. And when they may read this dictionary, they are confronted with other views.
That's right. Yes, yes.
With the other or theories of atonement and et cetera, et cetera. So it's a challenge for some people. In Latin America, we've been, there's some very famous authors that if not the justification that they have understood, everything else is heresy. And well, this dictionary will introduce people to.
Yes.
Yeah, you wanted to say something?
No, I'm looking at the essay on justification, and it gives, and many of our essays do, it gives you the topics that that the essay will look at, and I'll just read them here: the language of justification, righteousness in the Old Testament, context of justification, justification in works of the law, justification by faith, justification in Christ, justification as rectification, present and future justification, Paul and James on justification. So you can see this essay, very thorough, right? It's trying to cover as many aspects of justification as it can. And that's what all the essays try to do.
And from Latin Americans' perspective, is justification always we understand it from we are justified now, but it's never talk about future justification. And when N.T. Wright introduced this, and his book, What's Important Said, was translated into Spanish. Everybody said this is heresy, but this was a topic talk among theologians as well. And but because we were not as Latinos, we were not exposed to it.
Exactly.
They call everything else heresy.
So having a dictionary like this does expose them, right? It gives you a chance to hear what else is going on and then make your decision.
Yes.
Because you have the facts laid out. And you may still decide, I don't agree with N.T. Wright, but now you have a fuller picture.
Yes, yes. And there are some very good scholars that agree with N.T. Wright.
Yes, there are. Absolutely, there are. But not everyone does, right? No, hardly anybody agrees on everything.
Yes, and that's what makes people make books and books and
articles.
Well, I'd like to go into the next section, which is why you're here in Ridley College. You're teaching a class on women and ministry in the early church.
Yes.
Can you give me like a 1 minute, 2 minute rundown of what you're doing before we go into the questions? Please?
Sure. So it's a class that I was invited to give several lectures at the beginning of the class, and then at the end of the week, 2 other Ridley College professors are doing further classes. So my lecture is looking at the background of the women in the New Testament time period. So looking at Jewish women and what were their lives like, looking at the broader Gentile world. And, in both of these groups were the groups to which the gospel was presented, right? So how did women who were raised in a pagan environment, how did they hear the gospel and what would have changed in their lives? How about Jewish women? The same thing. Then I looked more specifically at how marriage was understood in the ancient world. What were some of their customs? What were the legal framework of the marriage? And did they divorce? And if so, what was that like? So just looking at those things. And then we took a look at certain biblical texts. So we looked at 1 Peter chapter 3 on marriage, and also Ephesians chapter 5 on marriage. We looked at, then we looked at women in the ministry roles in the church. So we looked at Romans 16, and we looked at 1 Corinthians 11.
Oh, yes.
I know.
That's a big one.
That's a big one.
100 pages in one of the commentaries. Tisselton, I believe. Tisselton, 100 pages just to talk about that 16 verses. 16 verses.
It's crazy.
Yes,
a lot there.
Well, Well, just like I mentioned to you before, these are questions from my associate, Veronica from Argentina. And she's very much into, as a woman, in living in Latin America. A lot of people, she puts studies, and she has followed some of yours. And there's Lady Eclecta. Remember this latest book? And we made a video out of it, out of this book. And people were criticizing her because she's a woman. She's not supposed to talk about this stuff. So I'm very privileged to have you because you have done a lot of work on this topic. And one of her questions is about women pastors in their ministry. In Jesus' ministry, we observe many female patrons and, like you said, patronage. And then in early Christianity, we see them as well. What kind of ministry were these women expected to carry out?
Yes. So patronage or benefaction was an incredibly important custom or informal institution at this time. It wasn't in the legal system. Like if I gave you a gift as a patron, it wasn't the same as a loan, like giving you a business loan that I would expect legally for you to repay me. Instead, it was a gift. But the custom was that you would somehow repay me. But it may be in giving me honor, in praising me publicly, or if I, as a patron, also wanted to influence a law over here that was going to go on, I would want you to vote the way I would want you to vote. Do you see what I mean? Like there's so we are in a relationship. Yes. A patron and their client, they're in a relationship. And so when we find that Jesus receives gifts from Mary Magdalene, Joanna, the wife of Chuza, these women contributed to Jesus out of their wealth. It wasn't like they just wrote a check and put it in the mail and it's all done. It meant that they were in a relationship. They were disciples of Jesus. They would have wanted to be very involved in his ministry. If Joanna, the wife of Chuza, had education, and there's a good chance that she did because she served in the court of, or her husband did in the court of Herod Agrippa, then she could use her place as a patron in the young ministry to teach, to provide resources, right? Not just food, although that's very important, but maybe some other resources. And she might be able to provide protection or inside information. Oh, I think the Herod Agrippa might be being upset with Jesus and his followers. Maybe should we think about going somewhere else? You know, in other words, benefactors helped not just with money, but with influence and networking.
Yes.
So some even say, for example, that Joanna was present at the trial, I'll put that in scare quotes, the trial that Herod Agrippa had with Jesus at the end of his life. You know, we learn about this in the Gospel of Luke. Well, how did Luke discover this information?
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Well, you know, Joanna is already there in the court, if you will. And so that would be another expectation of someone who's a benefactor, is you're always trying to help, to be helpful. And thus the wider group would honor you. Yeah. So that's what we would see. Another benefactor is Phoebe, who we meet. She's also a deacon. And we may talk about that in a minute. Yes. But she is what Paul says, she was a benefactor to me and to many others. And some people worry about that. They say, how can Paul be beholden to a woman? How can he receive a gift from a woman? Because that would mean he'd have to honor her, or he'd be expected to somehow return the favor. But Paul didn't seem to mind. It didn't bother him. Phoebe was a co-worker of his, right? She was, as he calls her, a sister in the Lord. And so they're all working in ministry together. But she has resources, and she used those resources for the ministry, especially Paul's ministry. So I can imagine that maybe she housed Paul when he came to Corinth. She was the deacon at the church of Cenchrea, which is the eastern port of Corinth. Corinth had two ports, on the east and on the west side. So she wasn't right in the center of the bigger city of Corinth. She was out on the coast. And so she might have housed Paul. She might have given him finances for him to go on his next travel. She may have also helped some of Paul's other co-workers. So maybe it's not Paul that stayed with her, but maybe it was Titus. So it's hard to know everything that a benefactor would do. But basically, they were using their influence, their network, and their wealth to help the other person.
And this is all a historical reconstruction. And some people reject that. I've seen some influencers, Latinas influencers, that said, no, Phoebe didn't read Paul's letters. She couldn't because she was a woman. But once we take into consideration the society and the culture expectations, it will be very hard for us to say, well, they were Christians, but they were like from the moon. They didn't follow their own culture.
Oh, exactly. And benefactors, female benefactors, might be called the mother of the city, right? And so it was not improper for them to be honored by the city, and they could speak just like a mother can speak to her children. So this benefactor can speak to the city. So it was not considered improper for a benefactor to give her opinions. No one thought that she was being immodest or not acting like a lady. No.
Oh, wow, okay. Well, because I had, like I said, a lot of influencers, they dress, there's the devoted wife or the surrender wife. And this is also in Spanish-speaking world, this idea. And they say that women in church, they're only there to support, taking care of the kids, making the food, cleaning. But what you're talking is something way beyond that. Something that in today's society would be like a man who supports a preacher that goes around and is putting money in.
Yeah, that's not. I mean, I don't want to critique the Latino culture. It's not my place. But I can say that in the first century, the second century, there wasn't that attitude about women, not Jewish women, not Greek women. They traveled. There were women that traveled with Jesus. There were women who presented the gospel. Think of Junia, who is mentioned with her husband Andronicus in chapter 16 of Romans. And they're in prison. They're in prison because of their preaching of the gospel. Yes. They're in prison just like Paul was in prison, right? He's presenting the message of Jesus. And we know that in certain cities, that angers people, right? And there's maybe a riot or something, and Paul can be thrown in jail. Well, so too Andronicus and Junia. So Junia, she's not thrown in prison because her husband was thrown in prison, because a husband could just be thrown in, and his wife, if she wasn't doing anything, she would be fine. But she's clearly also giving the gospel message. She is evangelizing to a group, and then others found out and had them arrested and thrown in prison. Yes. So we know that women are evangelizing. They're speaking the gospel enough to get in trouble. And that's an important thing, I think, to note is sometimes when we talk about the question of can women have a voice, what we really mean is, does a woman have authority in what she says? Yes. Yeah. And she might have authority to speak to a woman, but she wouldn't have authority to speak to a man. And I say that's really not the framework of the New Testament because it's not about getting power or having authority over. It's about sharing the gospel no matter what happens. So Andronicus and Junia, they are praised by Paul, and they're imprisoned because of the gospel. So that's what true leadership is, just like Paul's leadership. He's in prison. He suffers. He's, as an apostle, not grabbing for power, but he says, when I'm weak, then I am strong, because it is Christ's strength and it's God's strength in me. So I think it's important that we don't allow the world's definition of power and authority to define leadership, but we make sure we always think of leadership as the Lord taught us.
Yes. Well, second is the second question and final question is about presbyters and deacons. Female, of course, in this case. And this is a long question. Regarding presbyters and deacons, based on current scholarship, were presbyters supposed to function as church leaders in a way similar to modern pastors, or were they mainly elders? Because this is a thing that has come from the United States. There's a lot of churches in Latin America now that only elders, and to have one pastor is totally wrong. And I always tell them, well, you talk to the people from Revelation, they only have one pastor. The Lord didn't send the angel to talk to the elders, to only one. So, or were they mainly elders in the social sense, or both? I mean, let's start.
Yes, sure. Well, it's very hard to answer because we don't have a lot of detail. What we can say is that when Paul went around traveling and planting his churches, he met first in synagogue. So what do we know about the practices of the synagogue in the first century? Again, we don't know a lot, but we can say they were places of fellowship. Okay, so Jews and those Gentiles who were interested in Judaism, they could gather there. So it was a community place. Secondly, it was a place where the word of God was read. So even James, the Apostle James, in Acts 15, tells us on every Sabbath, Moses is read in the cities. And James knows that anyone can come to the synagogue. It's not like a holy space like the temple in Jerusalem is holy. Anybody can come. So they're hearing the word. And then we also know from the book of Acts that sometimes when Paul goes to a synagogue, as a visitor, he's invited to share a word. So it's not the same as a sermon necessarily, but clearly there was discussion about what was read that day or what might be useful for the people of God. So you think about it, then we have men and women, families who sat together. They didn't divide the synagogue, men and women at this time.
Okay.
Later in rabbinic Judaism, they do. And even today, some Jewish communities separate men and women. But in the first century, they were not. So you have these families who are hearing the word of God. So the boys and the girls grow up hearing the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, and maybe Isaiah. Depends on what scrolls might be available, because nobody had a Bible like this. That's a later invention, the Codex. But they would know the Word of God, and they would practice the festivals as they could. I mean, not everyone could go to Jerusalem for Passover, of course, but so that was the pattern. So I think those churches that met in the homes, like Priscilla and Aquila, they had a house church that met in their home. We can imagine that they would have read something from the Old Testament in some way. And if they didn't read it, because they might not have had a copy, then maybe they had memorized it. Because at this time, many people had memorized large portions. Now, the Gentiles wouldn't have memorized the Bible, but maybe they would have memorized the Iliad or poetry from one of their Roman poets. But the Jews would have memorized much of their scripture. So they could have recited that. And then, of course, Paul's letters. they would have been read week after week in the community. And the community would sing hymns, maybe some of the Psalms even that we have in our Bible. And they would have made a lot of prayers, and they would have given thanks to God. So, and they probably would have had a meal together. So those are the things that would be happening. Now, where does elder fit in on that? I mean, they're not maintaining a building the way that now we often have building and property and all that. They're not getting a formal education. So it's not like how much do they know, like sometimes today are requirements. No, there is a lot that we do today in church that the elders oversee that simply didn't exist in the first century. So I think it's hard to say, oh, the elders in the first century are the same as pastors today. That equation is not made in the New Testament. You have to assume several things to make that conclusion. Now, that said, there are different ways today that churches organize themselves. And I think, again, we often tend to focus on, well, what is my list of responsibilities? How much authority do I have? But if you look at, let's say, 1 Timothy chapter 3, what you find is not so much responsibilities like you have fiduciary responsibilities and, legal responsibilities and all of those things that we have today as you incorporate your church and is it tax paying or not, all that. But their characteristics, they're of a godly person. They describe virtues. They describe dispositions, right? And so that I think is more important, was more on Paul's mind. Are these people ones that others should imitate? Because of course that's how Paul sees in many ways his own leadership. Imitate me as I imitate Christ. So he'll say that to the Corinthians, but also to the Philippians. Imitate me and others who are like me. And so we want to model our growth as disciples on those who are more mature in the faith. So that might be a good starting point for churches as they think about how are we organized? How should we grow as a community of God, as the body of Christ? How do we grow? Yeah, and then organize themselves based on that.
And also these elders, like you said, they wouldn't be as we have here today, really college. People come to study for 3 or 4 years.
Exactly.
They get either Bachelor of Theology, they get a Master of Divinity, even a Master of Theology research or Doctor of Ministry or PhD. These are people who some of them Jews who just have something like they have a trade and they know their scriptures. And now they have come to knowledge that Jesus is the Messiah, the promised Messiah, and they continue with their beliefs, but from a Christ, Messiah, like N.T. Wright says, Messiah point of view.
That's right.
But they continue. They don't get special training, and that's why Paul says, "Imitate me as I imitate Jesus," because he's not there.
Yes,
he cannot supervise. He cannot supervise.
Yes.
Like when we are pastors, in my case, we get supervision for 3 years, and we have to look at someone who has always been supervised. And in these first 20, 30 years, no one's been trained to do what they expected. So going the difference between presbyteries and deacons, there's been suggestion that they may be doing the same type of work, or I know the deacons, for example, had roles such as assisting in the baptism of women. The question is, and as you've been teaching, I saw your picture. Where women, can we assume or can we conclude that some women also had a very ministerial role within the church, not only deaconess, but they could have also moved on to be an elder? That's one of my things in Titus. I see that in Titus. He gives them certain requirements for male elders, and then suddenly he goes on to also women. So in my reading, I see that they are also being invited into this eldership group. I mean, I would like to hear from you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think in answering that question, I like to see if there are actual women named in the New Testament as part of Paul's co-workers that might fit this. So we know the deacon Phoebe.
Yes.
And it's the word diakonos in the biblical text is in the masculine, which indicates, since it's a woman that's being talked about, when you use the masculine form, then it means that this is an office of deacon. And I would say that conclusion is reinforced because Paul says she's a deacon at the church of Cenchrea. So we know there is a church who said, you are our deacon. Okay? There may be other deacons as well in the church. We don't know. So we know that at least she was seen by the church as having particular roles and responsibilities. The problem is we don't know in each case what those would be, right? She's also a benefactor of Paul. So what that means is that she's very invested in Paul's overall ministry. When Paul starts that verse by saying, I commend to you, Phoebe, he is recommending her. All the other people he says, I greet, or please greet for me, But at the beginning here, he says, I commend to you, Phoebe. So this indicates he's recommending her, which most all scholars today believe that as part of that recommendation, and the reason he's doing that is because she's actually carrying the letter. And so that's just the protocol, is how they did it back then. So she carried the letter. Now, scholarship is more divided on whether she read the letter. But I think if it was a man, if this was Bob instead of Phoebe, we'd be like, well, of course he could read the letter. We wouldn't fuss about it. And there's enough evidence to suggest that those who carried the letter also read the letter. One of the interesting things about how Paul would have written the letter, or actually he would have had a scribe write the letter, is all the letters would be in capitals, and there would be no space between words.
Yes, I see.
And so you actually had to practice reading it, because you can imagine if you just see a row of letters, how can you distinguish? So people would practice before they read aloud to others, which meant that Phoebe, and like, let's say Tychicus, who delivers other letters, right? They would have read the letter in Paul's company to make sure that they are reading it the way Paul would have intended. And so if that's the case with Phoebe, then she would read the letter before Paul, and maybe Paul would say, oh, I want you to emphasize dikaiosune theou, the righteousness of God. I want you to emphasize when you say that, say it more loudly, or something like that. And so they would have practiced it, and then Phoebe might have asked a question. Well, what do you mean, dikaiosune theou, like the righteousness of God? If someone asks me, what do I say? And so she could be the first interpreter of Romans.
Yes. So these are like the lectures today in the Anglican Church. I remember when I used to go to an Anglican church, I was given the reading, and I have to also, because I'm reading, and I asked the minister, so what's going to be your emphasis? And so said that, so I have to read.
Yes, absolutely. So we see that, that connection that Paul has. Then I would say if we move to Philippians, we have two women named, Euodia and Syntyche. That's in chapter 4. But back in chapter 1, at the very beginning of the letter, Paul mentions the episkopoi and diakonoi, the bishops or the overseers and the deacons. It depends on how you interpret, the English there. I don't know the Spanish. But episkopoi and diakonoi. And I think a strong case can be made that Yodia and Syntyche are either in the group of deacons or the group of overseers.
Oh, this is new to me.
Yes, because it's so unusual. Paul doesn't ever introduce in his opening these offices except here. And he rarely, if ever, names people. I mean, he does Timothy, he does Epaphroditus, then he does Yodia and Syntyche, and he tells us these are his co-workers, these women. Their names are written in the book of life. So they are not being critiqued for their theology. Their theology is good, but they are struggling with a difference, probably a ministry difference. You know, do we do an outreach mainly to the Gentiles, or do we use our money to help our brother in Christ who is a baker and no one is visiting his shop anymore because now he's a Christian and no one will go? How do we use our money? I mean, it could be something, you know, churches do that all the time.
Yes.
How should we use our resources? And Paul is saying to these women, you have to come to an agreement. Be together. The unity of your congregation depends on it. So are they part of the episkopoi and diakonoi? And yeah, I think there are commentators who would make that argument. Now it's not stated exactly, but you're putting together some interesting, unique situations to come up with this answer. And then we have Aquila and Priscilla, who, along with Paul, are tent makers. They meet in Corinth. And in Corinth and in Ephesus and now in Rome, this couple has a house church that meets in their home. So they are seen as leaders in the community. And when they are in Ephesus, and they listen to another one of Paul's co-workers named Apollos, the couple speaks to Apollos and teaches him even a little bit more, I think especially about the area of baptism. They do so privately, not because a woman can't teach in a group, but because in their honor system, if you taught someone, like as a coworker, your peers, but you did it publicly, other people might think, oh, you're criticizing. You know, and it's a challenge to the honor of the other person.
It may be perceived as a criticism.
Exactly. But if you do it privately, like the disciples would ask Jesus privately, right? After he teaches out there, then they come back and they say to Jesus privately, what about this? Because they didn't want to ask in public. That could be seen as, why are you challenging, you know, your master, your teacher, your rabbi? No, you ask them when you're alone, when it's quiet, and then it's okay. So.
Well, as a teacher, you know that some of us as students, we don't like asking questions because we don't want to look dumb.
Yes, that is, and that probably was the case in the ancient world too. But I think when you see someone asking Jesus quietly on the side, what about this? Most likely it's because they respect him so much. And in the same way, Andronicus and Priscilla and Aquila, when they take Apollos aside, it's because they're honoring him, right? It's because they're saying, we don't want to embarrass you publicly. Let's talk quietly. Yeah. Now, today, some people read that and say, oh, well, Priscilla had to teach in her house. She couldn't teach, you know, in public. And I think, well, they didn't see public and private that way. The church met in their home. The church was obviously a public event. So, you know, it's not like she was going like how we see our houses today as private.
That'll be a 21st century imposition to a first century way of thinking.
Exactly. Yes.
Well, Lynn, I'm very happy. I don't want to take more of your time because I know that this was your day off in a sense, and I'm taking your time, but thank you very much. And I hope that after seeing this, my friends from CLIE will also be encouraged to, I already mentioned it, to to translate this. This is a big work.
Yes.
They have taken into account that they're translating Michael Bird's book with NT as well. It's coming out maybe in May.
Nice. That's
the
wonderful.
introduction. So you as a teacher, I think you appreciate that.
Absolutely.
That's one of the best introductions to the New Testament available today.
Yes.
So thank you very much.
No, thank you.
And I hope maybe next time you come down to Australia and come to Ridley College, we can talk about certain other things. I want to know more about juniors. I didn't want to ask you because I know that will take a long time.
We'll be here till dinner time.
Yes. Thank you very much.